Recently, I had a great question left in the comments of one of my videos, and to date, I don't think I've thoroughly covered this topic. So Turco949 wrote, just getting into the airbrushing and had a simple and possibly silly question. I noticed several different airbrushing artists do not use the muzzle cap. Why do they even install it on then? What benefit is there to leave it on? Well, first of all, Turco, it's not a silly question. We all were beginners at some point in our airbrush journey. We all have to start from the beginning. So in this video, I hope to answer that question plus a few others concerning the needle nozzle cap. So let's dive in. If you're not sure what we're talking about when I say the needle cap, the nozzle cap, the muzzle cap, whatever you want to call it, I'm talking about the very front of your airbrush. The tip of your airbrush has a cap that just unscrews. Here's a close-up view. So if we were to remove the needle cap by unscrewing it counterclockwise, remember lefty-loosey, righty-tighty, and remove it, you'll notice that the needle actually protrudes out of the front of the airbrush. Now if we go back to the previous photograph that showed the needle cap installed on the airbrush, you'll notice that the needle does not protrude farther than the needle cap. So the short answer is the needle cap is there to protect the tip of your needle as well as your nozzle from damage. The nozzle is the last internal part that your needle passes through in the airbrush. So if we remove the needle cap one more time, the nozzle cap is located directly behind the needle cap. You can see it better in this photograph. With the needle cap and the nozzle cap removed, you can actually see the nozzle. So the nozzle and the tip of your needle are very small, somewhat fragile parts of your airbrush, and they're easily damaged if you are not careful. So based on that information, why, as Turco noticed, do a lot of airbrush artists, including myself, choose to work with the needle cap removed? There's a couple reasons. The first one for me is tip dry. Tip dry is one of those things that we all have to deal with on occasion. It's just part of airbrushing. It doesn't matter what paint you're using, tip dry is part of airbrushing. What's happening is you have a constant flow of paint flowing over the tip of your needle. Around that, you have a constant stream of air flowing over the paint and the needle. Air assists paint in drying, so it stands to reason that at some point you're going to wind up with some dried paint on the very tip of your needle. That causes erratic performance, whether the spray pattern veers off in one direction or it can cause spitting. It's just generally not going to operate the way it should be. So we need to clean that tip dry, or the dried paint, off the tip of that needle. It's very difficult to do that if you have your needle cap installed. It's not impossible. You can do that. You can use a Q-tip dipped in whatever solvent or cleaner you're using for your paint system and gently push it in and work around the needle. That does a fairly good job. You can also do the same thing with a hairy paintbrush. Dip it into whatever cleaning solvent you're using and then work it away, or work it around the needle on the inside of the needle cap. I think the paintbrush works better than a Q-tip for this purpose. Another option is you can just remove the needle cap when you need to clean the tip dry off, and you can use a Q-tip or paintbrush. Personally, I prefer to just use my fingernails. I'll lightly and gently drag the dried paint off the tip of the needle, and then I'm ready to start working again. Depending on the airbrush that you have, there are different designs for the needle cap. For instance, this is a Badger Chrome, and if you look close at this one, and I'll show a good photograph of this, the needle cap is actually cut out to where you can still get your fingers in to the tip of the needle to clean tip dry off, and you still have some protection because of these horns that are sticking out for the end of the needle. It's not as much protection as the full needle cap that's on the Iwata, but there is still some protection there. So if you choose to airbrush with the added protection of leaving the needle cap attached to your airbrush, you can remove it relatively quickly, clean the tip dry from your brush, reattach it, and then continue working. It's not that big a deal, but it will add extra time. One other thing to note about the Badger Chrome, even though this is a different design for the needle cap, you can still remove it relatively easily and airbrush without the cap too, if you choose to do so. One of the other main reasons that I choose to airbrush with the needle cap removed is when I'm working with the needle cap attached, looking over the airbrush, I can't see the needle. I prefer to be able to see the tip of my needle. For one, that gives me a better idea of where I'm aiming, and two, I can usually see when tip dry is forming before it actually becomes an issue. I can wipe it off real quick and get right back to work. Another thing that comes into play here is the needle cap protrudes a little bit farther than the actual tip of the needle. If you look back at the photograph I just showed you a few minutes ago of the Badger Chrome, you can see the needle cap extends farther than the tip of the needle. It's not by much, but it does extend a little bit farther. So that gap, even though we're talking about a very, very small gap, makes a huge difference in my hands. I like to get super close and super tight to what I'm working on, the canvas, sometimes when, especially if I'm working on very tight, minute details. The airbrush cap doesn't allow me to get quite as close as I want to get sometimes. So I prefer to airbrush with the needle cap removed. Now, the pros again are, for one, I can see what I'm doing better if I can see the tip of the needle. Two, I can clean tip dry from the needle fast and easy and get right back to work. And three, I can actually get super, super close to the canvas. The disadvantages of airbrushing with the needle cap removed are obviously the needle and nozzle are more susceptible to damage. 90% of the time, in my experience, if I damage the tip of an airbrush needle, the nozzle is usually damaged as well. So it's a good idea to keep a spare needle and nozzle set for whatever airbrush you use on hand just in case. And just because you have the needle cap attached does not mean you will be immune from damaging the tip of your needle. I have dropped an airbrush in the past that had the needle cap attached and it still wound up bending the tip of the needle. So be aware of that. So other ways you can bend the tip of the needle is you can touch the surface that you're painting on a little bit too hard, or if you're working on a hard surface, it doesn't take a lot to bend the tip of that needle. They're very small parts. So you can bend the needle just by accidentally running into the surface that you're painting. Another way that I've bent many needles over the years is just dropping the airbrush. And in my experience, that usually happens because I will get the air hose caught on something, or I'll step on it inadvertently while I'm moving my hand and the hose goes taut and the airbrush just comes out of my hands and hits the ground. So accidents happen, it's just part of it. Aside from that, the only other real disadvantage I see with removing the needle cap is we're dealing with a very small part. These are not too terribly difficult to lose, so make sure you keep track of it, unless you have an airbrush that is designed to hang on to it. This is a Thayer and Chandler Omni 4000, and the needle cap on this airbrush is kind of cool because you can unscrew it just like you can the other two airbrushes, and then you can turn it around and screw it right back on, and now you can airbrush with the needle cap removed. You can see hopefully in the camera that the needle is protruding out, but the needle cap is still attached to the airbrush, so you won't use it. So that's my spiel on needle cap, the pros and cons of using it or not using it. If you're brand new to all this, I would suggest that you leave the needle cap on for a little while until you kind of get comfortable with how close you can actually get. It's not going to hurt anything if you touch the surface that you're painting on with the needle cap, but again, you can bend the needle if you're airbrushing without it. So if you're new to this, I would encourage you to use the needle cap for a while until you get a little more comfortable with operating the airbrush and kind of the space that you have to work within, how close you can actually get to the canvas. But aside from that, it's completely up to you guys. It's artist's choice at the end of the day. So I hope you guys have got something out of this. If you did, remember to like, subscribe, and share. I'll leave links in the description below to these 3 airbrushes if you're interested in checking them out a little bit more. I am an Amazon affiliate. If you decide to make a purchase and you purchase through one of those links, I will get a small commission off of that, which helps to support the channel, and I greatly appreciate that. So again, I hope you guys got something out of this. I'm Trevor with Wicked Art Studio. I'll see you guys next time.